Okay, so I have a transcript of Casey Anthony talking to Detective Melich, and this was conducted on July 16, 2008. I'm not going to read every single piece in here because it is quite extensive and quite long. There's actually a couple of different ones, as you can see. There's a lot of them. So I'm just going to pick out the main points of her testimony. They are talking to her, and it's about 0411, and they talk about her statements that she signed, and there's that saying, is everything contained in those statements true and accurate, and she says yes. And then they go into, before they turn the recorder on, they gave her a chance, because they wanted to explain if she made a false report, that there's something about the incident that they're not telling the truth, telling them the truth of, and she's like, they want to make it perfectly clear before they, that she could rescind the statement if she wanted to tell a different story, and she's like, and they said if you're trying to fabricate something, to make it sound a little bit better, and that, and that they're like, "Are this the story you want to stick with?" And she's like, "That's the truth. That's the story I'm gonna stick with. Yes." I want to point out, she says, "That's the story I'm gonna stick with. Yes." Personally, with me, I would have been like, "That's not a story. That's what happened, and yes, I'm sticking with it. It's not a story." So that's my first red flag there. And they just go back and reiterate her daughter's name, when she was born, and that back on June 9th, 2000. Now, Casey says, get this, on June 9th, you took Kaylee to the babysitter's house. Casey says yes. And who is the babysitter? She said her name is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. Do you know how to spell the first name? She spells it. And then she says, and where was Zenaida's? Where did you drop off your child? And Casey says the Sawgrass Apartments on Conway, Michigan. She's like, do you remember the address? No. They asked her if she remembered the apartment number, and she said 210. And she says it's on the second floor. Then they ask, how long have you known Zenaida? She says almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years Christmas this year. And where did you meet her? Who did you meet her through? A mutual friend, his name is Jeffrey Michael Hopkins. I met him at Nickelodeon at Universal. I met her through him. She was his son's nanny at the time. And then she says, they asked, does Jeffrey still work at Universal? No, he does not. How long has it been since he left? She replies with about 9-10 months, give or take. Then she comes up with a laboratory. They asked if he moved back to Jacksonville. She said he moved up to North Carolina for a short time and then moved back down to Jacksonville within the last 3 months. And then they said, when was the last time you spoke with him? About a week and a half ago. Okay, do you know a telephone number for him? I can find a number for him. I know I have. I don't have a number offhand. No, I do not. They said, about 2 cell phones. Your cell phone to work. Anyways, all that other lies and BS that that aren't extremely as important as the lies she tells about Kaylee. But just shows how extravagant she gets through them, and just how extravagant her lies are. And then, she tells how she on the phone. Then they get back to Kaylee. They ask, and when did she start watching over your child? Casey responds, it's been within the last 1.5 years, 2 years that she started watching Kaylee. I had another friend watch Kaylee that I've known since middle school. When she went back to school, I was looking for a new nanny. Jeff offered to have Zenaida watch both kids. She agreed, and it kind of went from there. Question. Before Zenaida started watching over your child, who was it? Who was the nanny? Answer. Her name was Lauren Gibbs, And when did Lauren stop watching your child? Maybe April 2006. They ask at the end of April 2006 roughly is when Zanaya started watching her. Casey says yes. They ask how would you normally drop off? How would you normally do the exchange with your child and Zanaya? Would you drop the child off? Would she meet you somewhere? Casey, I usually dropped her off. For a few months we'd go over to Jeff's house. He lived in Avalon Park. That was a couple of years ago, almost a couple of years ago. And you would go to Jeff's house. Why? To drop off Kaylee. That's where Zanaya would watch both kids. And then she continues to say, it was a nice centralized area. He had a decent sized house. It was good room for the two of them. Then I started bringing Kaylee over to Zanaya's apartment. How long were you using, or were you going to Zanaya's apartment? When did you start taking Kaylee? I guess maybe the end of 2006 beginning of 2007. So since 2010 to 2006 beginning of 2007. She states, you started taking Kaylee to Zanaya's house on Sawgrass. Then Casey goes into another story. She had an apartment on, I guess it's considered Glenwood, but it's off from Bumby in Robinson, close to downtown. She lived there for quite a few months and moved over to Grassaw just recently this year. Then they ask, how long ago did you say you dropped the child off there? From the end of 06, beginning of 07 to, she goes, I think about 6-7 months, so maybe the middle of 2007. So she moved to Sawgrass in the middle of 07. She's been at the apartment in Sawgrass for the last 3 or 4 months. She lives with her mom for a little bit. Where's her mom live? She lived off from Michigan. Do you know where the house is? It's not very well marked neighborhood. It crosses just over Conway. It's one of the big stretches of neighborhoods. Have you dropped her off before? Yes. If you had to find the place, would you be able to find it? Most likely, yes. I think I remember the house. Then it goes on to say, then Mom's house. Her mom wasn't living there at the time. Her mom had gone another place with her sister that she was staying over at the house and moved in with the 2 girls that are referenced in the pages. She was living with 2 girls in Sawgrass? Yes. Okay, going back to your statement. You dropped off Kaylee on the 9th of June. Walk me through. You dropped her off and go to work. Okay, get off from work and go from there. Casey says, I got off from work, left Universal, driving back to pick up Kaylee like a normal day. And I show up at the apartment, knock on the door, nobody answers. So I called Zanaya's cell phone, and it's out of service. It says that the phone is no longer in service. Excuse me. So I sat down on the steps and waited for a little bit to see if maybe it was just a fluke, if something happened, and time passed. I didn't hear from anyone. No one showed up at the house, so I went over to J. Blanchard Park and checked a couple other places where maybe possibly they would have gone. A couple of stores, just regular places that I know Zanaya shops at, and she's taken Kaylee before. And after about 7 o'clock, when I still hadn't heard anything, I was getting pretty upset, pretty frantic. And I went to a neutral place. I didn't really want to come home. I wasn't sure what I'd say about not knowing where Kaylee was. Still hoping that I would get a call or, find out that Kaylee was coming back so that I could go get her. And I ended up going to my boyfriend Anthony's house, who lives in Sutton Place. And I just talked to Anthony Azar about it. She said no. Who is Tony? And they asked, have you seen it? Yes. They asked, have you talked to anyone about Kaylee, about your incident with Kaylee, or the fact of she's missing? Casey says, outside of a couple of people, a couple of mutual friends. Who did you talk to about? I talked to Jeffrey Hawkins. I also attempted to contact Zanaya's mother. I never received a call back from her. Do you know Zanaya's mother's name? Wow. I think it's Gloria. Do you know a telephone number for Zanaya's mom? I do not know. Now, she just said she tried to contact her. Why would she have that number? I'm picking her story apart like there's no flipping tomorrow. They asked, okay, so after a full year of dealing with Zanaya and having her babysit, you don't remember? Switching numbers back and forth. Zanaya's has changed a couple of different times. She switches services between having Sprint and having AT&T or Singular. What about Jeffrey? You've known him for at least 4 years. His number changed a couple of times from when he moved from Orlando up to North Carolina and back to Jacksonville. I know I have a current number for him. They asked, how would you get the number? Casey, if we find that other phone, or I might have it on mine, I might be able to access it off the internet. Alright, question. You talked to Jeffrey. Who else did you talk to? I talked to Juliette Lewis. She's one of my co-workers at Universal. You still work at Universal? Yes. And, what do you do at Universal? Event coordinator. Okay, what is Juliette's position? Where does she work? She's also an event coordinator. We work in the same department. You have a number for Juliette? Offhand, I can't think of one. No, she's not. Some of them are recent numbers. Her number just changed because she just moved back up north. Within the last 2 months, she's finished moving up to New York. She's subleasing her apartment. So, as they get deeper and deeper in questions, she has to keep changing her story. Because she said she works with her and X, Y, Z. So, Juliette doesn't work at Universal anymore. No, she does not. When did she leave Universal? About 2 months ago. Who else did you talk to? It's been within that small group. I've tried to find out information from people going to different places like Fusion, Ultra Lounge, and a couple of bars I know Zenaida had gone to downtown before to see if just kind of random talk, if anybody heard about my nanny or talked to her lately. Did you tell anyone specifically that Zenaida took your child? No, the only 2 people I specifically told were Jeff and Juliette. Of course she tells the 2 people that do not exist in this world. It's not on your phone. Might be online. Casey, it's definitely online. I know it's one of our old worksheets. Her old number, which could still be active, I'm not sure if it is, but I know she does have a new number, which I programmed into that new phone. When was the last time you talked to Juliette? About 3 weeks ago, shortly after this happened. So you talked to her after she left? Affirmative. Question. What's the reason I asked you this before, and I'll ask you just for the record. What's the reason you didn't call the police before, since now we're here because your grandparents or your parents asked you about the child and they were concerned. Didn't get an answer as to where the child was. They called the sheriff's office. Why didn't you call prior today? Casey, I think part of me was naive enough to think I could handle this myself, which obviously I couldn't. And I was scared that something would happen to her if I did notify the authorities or got the media involved. Or my parents, which I know would have done the same thing, just the fear of the unknown. Fear of the potential Kaylee getting hurt and of not seeing my daughter again. I asked you this at the onset and before we went on tape, and I'll ask you again just to make sure we're clear. Is there anything about the story you're telling me is untrue? Casey, no. Or is there anything you want to change or divert from what you've already told me? Casey, no, sir. Did you cause any injury to your child, Kaylee? Casey, no, sir. Did you hurt Kaylee or leave her somewhere in your... Casey, no. Worried that if we find out that people are going to look at you wrong way? Casey, no, sir. You're telling me that Zenaida took your child without your permission and hasn't returned her? Casey, she's the last person I seen with my daughter, yes. Where did Zenaida... Does she have another job besides watching children? Casey, she has a seasonal ID for Universal. However, the only job that I know that she's had for the last few years, she's been a nanny. When was the last time she worked at Universal, do you know? Casey, I have no idea. Okay, you said Zenaida had family in New England or up in New York or something. Casey, yes, she has family down south. Her mother, sister, her brothers in New York. She's originally from New York. And where's down south? Miami area. Where is she originally from? New York. Question. She born, raised in New York. She got family outside of the country, or... Casey, I don't know. As far as I know, she's pretty much grew up there, moved down here, went to University of Florida. She's Puerto Rican and Dominican. Is she white? Casey, she's mixed. She's black and Puerto Rican. Question. And you don't know what her birthday is, or you know when her birthday is? Casey, it's in September. That's all I can remember at the moment. Question. If, when we finish this, if you would be willing to drive me to show me where her mom lives, in the apartment that you used to drop her off at? Casey, yes. End of transcripts. And this is where I'm going to end this video.